Hey, I got something to say. This is a special edition of Hey, I Got Something to Say that I do 4 times a year with a dude that I absolutely love. Yes, the show is usually mainly for women, but a few times a year I bring a dude on, and I freaking love this guy. I think I met Matt LaBosco. I don't even know. Maybe it's been 10 years. He'll have to remind you. But he is just awesome sauce. He is freaking incredible. He is one of, I hope he can't hear us, but he probably can. He's probably coming in. He's backstage. I'm letting him in now. And there he is. Oh my God. There he is. Matt's in the house.
What's up, everybody?
All right, so you figured out how to come in, no problem. It was easy, wasn't it?
I did, huh? Look at me.
Yeah. So you have to change it up so I can see your whole head. Otherwise, I just see your eyebrows.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah. So how are you?
I'm amazing. How are you?
I like you. Did you get a new haircut?
I did.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stay better groomed, Cindy. More frequent haircuts.
All right, so they like knowing the real deal. So I can't remember when we met. I know I went blank. Like, how many years ago?
Oh, it's got to be close to 10.
I said 10. Yay!
Yeah, it's got to be close to 10, which is...
And that's when you were a Cali boy. Remember that?
I was living in California.
Okay. And you had a business in California.
Yes.
But you weren't a Cali
Jersey boy. I'm a Jersey boy, Sandy.
That's
always. But
I knew that's why we got along.
Of
Jersey
course.
girl. I didn't even put that together. All right. So, are you done fiddling with your tripod?
Well, I wish that I could just leave it and it would stay here. But if I let it go, you miss my head.
Can you sink down?
I'm going to go this way. How about
yes! That? Look at you, a problem solver.
See? Don't believe everything they say.
Oh, my God. So, before we get into this, I just want to give you a little bit of background about Matt. Matt was on one of my first podcasts called What Keeps You Up at Night. And shout out to our friend Gloria, who said, oh my God, he healed me. She went to your, I don't even know what the company was called, your body work, mental work, physical therapy. You brought her back from, thinking she'll never be able to bike again. And she was so
Gloria
impressed.
Martin.
Yep, yes. That she said, come on, have him on your show. And then we did that. And all I remember, and maybe I'm making up stuff, is you said, that you were training in this one program and you needed guinea pigs. And could you coach me for 2 years? Is that true?
100%. I was going through a program. We needed, people to experiment on. And you volunteered.
I was good with that.
You were.
But I'm thinking, let me help the dude. But then it just switched that I ended up thinking you were just the bomb. And I stayed with you. And to this day, you're just, I think you really have this gift from the universe to, yes, you're going to help a lot of people. But the biggest thing that I was so impressed with you is that your main mission was to empower me. And for me to tap into all my unique powers and gifts and embrace my background and my brain. And that's what I'm all about. And I think that's so important. And I got to think about that recently because I've been at a lot of networking events and people talking about coaches and life coaches that they're getting a back rap and people trying to get them sucked into doing these year-long programs and maybe they're good, maybe they're bad. I'm thinking, I don't know. And so I'm like, wait a minute, I got to bring Matt on. And we're going to talk about this subject because I think people, just like they're confused what to eat, it's like mayday, therapist, psychiatrist, coach, nothing. So before we tackle that issue, let me tell them a little bit about you. Through his best-selling book, Health to Vitality, his online courses, live events, and exclusive one-on-one coaching practice, Matthew has inspired and educated thousands of individuals to escape from the limitations of the traditional healthcare model, and empower them to access a level of physical, mental, and systemic well-being that they didn't realize was possible. See, that's what I'm talking about. Matthew's formal education. Shit, man, I didn't know you did all this. I just liked you. All right, here you go. Matthew's formal education includes a degree in psychology from Rutgers College. How did I not know that? Is a graduate of American Institute of Alternative Medicine. I didn't know that. Licensed massage therapist. Didn't know that. A certified active release technique practitioner. Did not know that. A fellow of applied functional science through the Gray Institute. Didn't know that. Is a certified part math coherence trainer. Yep. And a practitioner of applied modern psychology. You seek knowledge, my friend.
Oh, man. The more you learn, the more you realize you know nothing.
Right.
So that's why you got to keep learning.
That's exactly right. I know nothing. Matthew's vision is to empower individuals to step out of their limitations of the traditional health paradigm and into the unlimited possibilities of a vitality paradigm. So Matthew's statement, when I told him what we were going to talk about, said, one thing he wanted to tell men and women around the world, because only 4 times a year I bring on a guy, whoop, whoop. If you are going to trust your one person, trust yourself. So why did you pick that of all the statements? If you're going to trust one person, trust yourself.
The reason I picked that statement was because working with people, and not to mention myself, for the last, obviously working with myself for the last 45 years, but working with people for the last 20 or so years in the health and wellness, vitality, personal development space, the most empowering thing I find I can do for somebody is get them more connected to themselves and teach them how to trust themselves, because all the answers they seek are right there. And where people get into the most trouble is when they are convinced not to trust themselves, start to question themselves, and then give that power over to somebody else. Mm-hmm. And that's where I see things go south. That's where things have gone south for me. Anytime I've dissociated from trusting that voice, that thing that just doesn't feel right, something not right about this, but what do I know? They're the professional, they're the whatever. And every single time I look back on those moments, I'm like, Matt, there's your reminder. Trust yourself, trust that voice, trust that knowing. And that is my number one mission when I work with people, is to get them more connected to that so they can trust that. I know we'll pull that apart a little bit today, theoretically anyway.
Yeah. Well, Matt, I'm so glad you mentioned that, pulling it apart, because lately when I'm going to these fundraisers and they're asking me about all these questions with therapist, coach, life coach, who do I pick? I told them you were coming on the show. And I'm going to hit you with the number one question I got over and over again, but especially by this young man. He's 38. He's been divorced 3 times. No judgment here. And Billy Bob said, all right, you asked Sandy, you keep saying Matt is the real deal, and he's got all the answers. I didn't say that, but I didn't say that, maybe. No. Okay. That trust yourself. Okay. But after 3 divorces, I'm a little reluctant. And everyone keeps saying to me in my family, no, do not trust yourself anymore. Bring whoever you think you're going to marry to us, because you cannot trust yourself. You don't, whatever it is, the filter, you don't have it. He was hysterical about it, but I was like, well, maybe you should bring her by, Mom and Sissy, because he's like, I think I have a bad judge of character.
Yeah, and that's funny, and that's a question that I get asked a lot too with this.
You do?
And yeah, I mean, if I haven't made good decisions in my life, how can I trust myself, right? Quote unquote. So there's 2 things I would say to that. One, what I find, and this may not be the case for Billy Bob, but one thing I do find in those scenarios is that you're not really tapped into yourself, meaning when I ask those people, what do you want? Like, we really create a space to really reflect on, well, what is it that you want out of a partner, right? Like, what does that look like? What does that sound like? Like, how much time have you actually spent thinking about that and distinguished between what you truly want and what you've been told you should have in a partner? Like, those are two different things. And so that's one caveat to the trusting yourself, is you have to be connected to yourself. And to get connected to yourself, that takes work. Like, you have to spend time with yourself to get to know yourself and get to understand what you authentically desire and want, and distinguish it between what you've been told you should want, right? So that could be a whole nother podcast. So that's one thing that I would say there is, have you really spent time with yourself and really gotten clear on what you really want? Do you even want a partner? Or are you engaging in that because you think it's what you're supposed to do, right? Like, these are the bigger questions, right? So that's one piece that I'll stop there because we could go down that rabbit hole. The second piece that I think is misunderstood about this idea of trusting yourself is, trusting yourself means you have to be correct, right? So if I trust myself, hey, I feel like it's the right thing to do this thing. You do it and you find out it wasn't the right thing to do. So then people say, see, I shouldn't have trusted myself. No, triple down on trusting yourself next. You've accumulated information that you didn't have when you made that first choice. And so if you trust yourself to know what's best for you, trust that you needed to learn that lesson. You needed to get that information, that intelligence from that decision, integrate that new knowledge into what you know now, and now double down again on trusting yourself with the new knowledge and information. I find that at that moment where someone trusts themselves and they make the quote unquote wrong decision, whatever the hell that means anyway, they're like, see, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to ask someone else what I should do. And that is a slippery slope. I have gone down that slippery slope myself. I am speaking from things I have done. I am not excluding myself from any of these things that I'm sharing with you. And so trusting yourself doesn't mean you always have to be right. You want to cultivate and nurture that intelligence inside of you so that you can trust it more and more, and trust that if it makes sense to do X right now, trust that. And maybe there's a greater intelligence that's sending you down that road so that you can learn things that are essential to the ultimate thing you're pursuing.
Yeah. You know what? I'm so glad you said that, because I was just talking to my son, who's a freshman in college, and he's an art major. I think you know that, Matt. He was talking to some of his buddies, and in art, you have to take foundation courses, everything. And some you like and some you hate, whatever. And he said to me, I don't know, maybe we were thinking we should just let our counselor pick our courses because we really don't like some of these courses. And I'm like, no. When you know what you don't like, you know more what you do like. So it's the same thing, right?
Exactly.
I said, this is what freshman year is all about.
Yes. It's so important for youngsters to hear that, because there's this idea out there that they're supposed to know what they want and supposed to have it all figured out. Like, any 20 to 25-year-old I ever talked to, I'm like, go out there and try everything. Play, see what you like, trust yourself. I literally had a session with someone yesterday. It's a young man who's, kind of bought into the idea that you're supposed to graduate college, you're supposed to make a job. I think he said, quote unquote, at least $80,000 and at least I'm on my way, right? Well, the best thing that could ever happen to him is he didn't get that job that he thought he was going to get. And he was a good student, so on and so forth, but missed the job that he was supposed to get. And now he's struggling. What do I do? And I literally, this is a conversation I had with him yesterday. I said, I'm starting to get to know him. We've only had a couple sessions together, but he told me about this incredible passion he has for aquariums. And he makes these incredible aquariums, home aquariums with coral, and they're beautiful. They look professionally done. It's just this hobby. And he's super fired up about it. And he's talking about, I want to start, this is like prior conference, I want to start my own business. I'm like, dude, why not look into helping people service their aquariums? And he's like, oh my God, that would be amazing. I would love that. He's like, yeah, but then that but shouldn't I get the job at the corporate America? I'm like, no, man, trust that right now. Explore that. If
Yeah.
you're interested in business, I don't care if you start a lawn practice, an aquarium practice, or you open up any business. Like, business has principles that you need to learn. He's 22, 23 years old. It's like, hey, trust that pull to that passion that you have, because if you're going to open a business and you don't have passion, then you're not going to have the resilience and the tolerance to overcome all the difficulties of business, right? And so it was just a perfect example of that little voice that I had to like coach out of him. Like, hey, what's the thing? And he was like, he lit up like a Christian, just a kid, like really upset, didn't know direction. Then he's like talking to me about these aquariums. I'm like, man, why don't you look into that and see where that takes you, right? And that's an example of a moment in his life where he had this voice saying, dude, this is awesome. We love this. It's going to be so fun. He's like, oh my God, I could sell these things. I love talking about this.
Yeah.
He just got a job as an insurance rep, and he's like, I hate selling insurance and it's not fun, but I feel like that's what I'm told people, I can make a lot of money doing this. Like, it's that, that battle that people have of the shoulding versus what they really, really want to do in that moment. Now, does that mean he's going to do the aquarium business for the rest of his life? No, it doesn't matter. So I said to him, I said, listen, play here, go play, explore, have fun. You're still taking classes, so it's a perfect side gig. You'll learn about business, but he'll also enjoy doing it, right? And so I just thought it was a good example of like that little voice that can get just, quieted so quickly by other people's narratives that we've adopted.
Absolutely. So I like to hang out and meet kids. And whenever I drop my son off, I spend time maybe in the hallways talking to some kids. And I was shocked. And these are our majors. Keep that in mind. So they're already passionate about how many freshmen are stressed out and anxious because they don't have it figured out and they don't know what they're doing. And so I said to them, oh my gosh, and they said, could you talk to our parents? And I said, I'm going to ask Mac, because they said they're getting mixed signals, meaning like, we want you to be happy, follow your dream, be passionate, but there's some disconnect. And then they're like, they did this, and then did this. So they want to know, quote unquote, what the hell do we say to our parents? Because something is truly missing. There was a group of them, and let's talk to the parents, forget the kids. How can you help the parents guide their kids? Because they really feel like they be happy, but only be happy if you do this, this, and this. And that's where all the anxiety is coming from and the pressure they feel. I'm like, you're a freshman.
Yeah, well, it's a tricky one because, depending on how old the child is, right? If they're
probably 18 or 19 because they're freshmen in college.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and every situation's different. So let me put that caveat out there. But I would personally encourage anyone, young adult, to make sure they're at least on the trajectory of owning their life for themselves and not for anybody else, especially their parents. And I say the trajectory because it's a process, right? It's like, there isn't like, well, I own this destination called, well, now I'm owning myself from my life and then I'm not. It's like, am I listening to what, that inner voice in me, what makes sense to me, taking in the information from parents and other mentors, which I know we're kind of talking about today. But here's the big question that I ask when somebody offers me advice, whether it's solicited or not, usually when it's unsolicited. Has this person who's offering me advice, whether it's parent or not, have they accomplished what I want to accomplish in my life? Are they living the life that I want to live? Right? Because if they're not, then I have a famous saying, and if I've said this to you and you've given me advice, I'm giving myself away, but I'll say, hey, I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you. Like, if you give me advice and I understand that you're telling me something on how to get to a destination you've never been to, you haven't accomplished, you haven't
Yeah.
fulfilled,
Yeah.
then I'm going to take that with a grain of salt, and I'm going to seek out individuals, people that have fulfilled things that I'm looking to fulfill, and probably follow their thoughts more, their advice more.
Yeah. Well, the reason I brought this up because it's the same thing. The kids were wanting to know. They constantly hear, not all the time, but many of them from adults, well, your brain isn't fully formed. You know what I mean? Because they're freshmen in college. You need us to guide you. So that was the big thing from this group of kids, and Sally girl was leading it, is we constantly hear, don't trust ourselves, that there's no way for us to possibly know, and that their parents or these other people have been through it, and their brain isn't, one kid said fully developed till 20.
Sure, right.
They said, help me, Matt.
Yeah, and there's truth to that, sure, that we all need guidance in our life. All I'm saying is be discerning about where you take the guidance from. If you see a characteristic about your parents that you admire, like, you know what, my mom is really good at this, my dad's really good at this, so when they give me advice on financial, being financially stable and building wealth, like, they've got that dialed. I see that. I want to create that. So when they give me some advice on the financial piece, I'm listening. You follow me?
Yep.
But if your parent has been divorced 7 times and they're giving you relationship advice, just say, thank you for your thoughts. I appreciate your thoughts. Because they may be trying to make sure you don't make the same mistakes they've made, right?
Right.
And that's all good. It's good intention, and it doesn't make them bad or evil, but you really want to ask yourself, hey, I'm hearing this from this person.
Good point.
They're giving me advice on X. Have they shown any capacity to fulfill X? And so I think, and yes, it's practice it takes practice to trust yourself, but there's also being able to discern from who do I listen to and who don't I listen to, which is very challenging.
Yeah.
But
somebody privately just emailed me, because they do that when they don't want the questions to come up here. I wish I could tell you who she is, but whatever. She's like, all right, I hear you too, but I want to get into being a life coach. So this woman was a therapist for 20 years, and now she's been a life coach for 7. She almost wants to go back to calling herself a therapist because of the connotation of life coach. She's like, I'm not saying she's not great at it, but one of my friends who just seemed like she was bored over COVID and her life is a complete, quote unquote, hot mess, became a life coach, and now says she has all the answers for me. I'm not saying she doesn't, but I've heard this a million times. At least I want her to be on the other side of it.
Yeah, I would agree.
That's a lot to unpack there, but I understand what she's saying.
I think she's 1,000% right, and it's absolutely something you have to be mindful of, right? And just because you understand something doesn't mean you can execute on it. So you can explain to me how to play one of Mozart's pieces on the piano, and I can intellectually understand how I'm supposed to play this thing, right? I understand the notes, I understand, but if I haven't actually been able to do that, in my opinion, it's going to be much more difficult to teach someone how to do that. Okay, so it's one thing to understand how to accomplish X. It's another thing to have accomplished it. And so I agree with her.
I understand.
I agree with her that because it's the good and bad news about the life coaching space is it's unregulated, right? Anybody can call themselves this idea of a life coach, right? But this is where you have to vet them, right? And if if they're not in living and embodiment and, you know, living the kind of lifestyle and have coached others to do so, then
Yeah.
I would maybe interview other ones.
Well, what do you think about her wanting to be back and calling herself a therapist? Because she's kind of not liking being lumped in, like, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, here's what I can tell you. And I understand I used to train her because I didn't want to be called a personal trainer. So I created other names for myself because I didn't want to be lumped in with that group. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. The public really doesn't care what you call yourself. They just want you to know that you can get them results. Like, I can tell you that from my experience. Most people that I work with right now, they still are like, so what are you? What do you do again? Like, I don't know what to tell people you are. Like, some people think I'm a therapist, even though I'm clearly state that I'm not, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I think it's gotten to a point in our society where the kind of the cat's out of the bag about some of these more traditional models, and people are looking for alternative things. Not that there are phenomenal therapists in the world. And I will say that the way I distinguish therapy from life coaching, if that's helpful, like, what's the difference there? Because I think that's a question I get a lot. Like, what's the difference between a therapist and life coach? The way I look at it is therapy really is about talking about the past and overcoming trauma from the past and really delving into the past and how it's impacting you today. Mm-hmm. Life coaching is more about moving forward, creating something moving forward, like focusing on goals and how do I accomplish this and that, right? And so life coaching is a little more focusing on creating the life you want to live. Therapy is usually more centered around assistance with navigating some kind of pain or trauma in someone's life, right? And so that's how I think about those two spaces. And so that's why I refer to myself more as a life coach, because I'm about, like, where are we going? How do we get there? Now, do I have some skill set and training and navigating some of the things that come up from the past that can interfere with going forward? 100%, but I just know a lot of time is spent there. We kind of do what we need to do and then continue to move forward. Now, in some situations, like, hey, you need to talk to a trauma specialist.
Oh, you do? You do refer people?
For sure. Yeah, if it gets to the place where it's like, hey, this isn't my specialty. I can go maybe level 1 or 2 with you, but you need to go to level 7. That's not me.
Well, yeah, there was one guy I spoke to yesterday, and he said, how do you feel about having both in your life at the same time? Because he has a therapist, and he thinks the guy is great, but it's not getting him where he wants to go.
Exactly.
So should he wait till he's done the therapist, or could he do them at the same time?
Okay, I'll give you a best case scenario. Best case scenario is the therapist, the life coach are working with each other, and they're collectively helping you. So they're both
Would that be
together
awesome?
To me, that's ideal. Okay, how readily available is that? Probably not super, but you know, it's always something to shoot for, at least put out there. I think for sure you can work with both. There can be conflict if one is constantly focused on the past and the other one's trying to get you to look forward, right? Because those are two different ways to look at things, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm constantly trying to fix myself, right? This is the classic. This actually happened to me recently. I have people that come in and say, hey, Matt, I want you to help me to work on my anxiety. So, like, this lady said this to me literally this week, and I've had other people say this to me. And I go, well, how long have you been working on your anxiety? And she said, well, it's been about 30, 40 years. And I said, well, it sounds like you've mastered it. Let's work on something else. Right? It's like, you know, at a point in time, we got to focus on something else.
Yeah.
Right? We got to focus on moving forward. Like, what do you want to create? And usually when I ask those people, okay, I got you, but let's assume the anxiety is not there. What do you want to create with yourself? What do you want to create with your life? And you know, the number one answer is that I get, I don't know.
Ooh, really?
I don't know, 100%, because all they can tell me is what they don't want.
Oh,
And
interesting.
that is in my mind, a flag that all they've been doing is focusing on what they don't want. So their brain can't even come up with an answer to what do you want? What do you want to create? Their mind just goes blank.
Right. I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to be
Exactly.
anxious. I don't want to be overwhelmed.
I just don't want to be in a relationship that has this. I don't want a relationship with that. Like and I used to have a rule when I would do a consult with people is I give them a half hour to tell because I ask them all the same questions like, hey, how can I help you? What would you like to create in your life? What do you want to create? And I have a rule. I'll only let them go for a half hour and tell me all the problems in their life and what they want to correct. And at the half hour mark, if they're still going, I go, thank you so much. That's so helpful. But do you remember the question I asked you? And then, and 9 out of 10 times, it's like, actually, I don't. And so it's like, okay, that's all right. But what I asked you is, what do you want to create? What do you want to? I hear all that's happened, but where do you want to go?
Yeah.
Where are we going? Right now, it sounds like a simple question. It's not for so many of us because we've been so practiced in focusing on what's wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And training ourselves to constantly try to solve these problems. Here's a newsflash for everybody. Ready? There's always going to be problems to solve. Like they're not going away, right? But let's solve them on a worthy pursuit. As we're pursuing something that we want, well, there'll be problems there too. So let's solve the problems that help us get to that worthy pursuit.
I was just saying to my neighbor, she was talking about the other neighbor, and all the neighbor does is, complain, whatever. And I said, their nature is to worry and they don't want to change it. So if you solve the problem and you cut down that tree, they're going to worry about something else. They're going to replace it because
that's what focus, right?
They're conditioned to worry. Yeah. So if it's not that, it's going to be that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't resolve that unless they want to resolve it.
You got it.
So big one. You mentioned about spending time with yourself. Trust yourself. You need to spend time with yourself. Really, what do you want in a mate? Is it really what other people think? You got to get to know yourself. Well, I ask that question a lot to my peeps. And the big thing this one woman just said to me 2 days ago is, I know I should spend time with myself, but this one woman was trying to convince me that the only way to do it is to go to a retreat that was a 3-day retreat in the woods. Isn't there another way that I can spend less than $1,500? I was cracking up. Okay, it was all kinds of funny. But they are confused, but you hear it a lot. Spend time with yourself. And then she called me. She was like, Sandy, I go, no, Megan, I'm not saying retreats are bad. They're good. So I retreat, all that stuff. But let's dive into who is this person and what are you doing? And so I told her I was going to bring this up to you.
Yeah. So I think of it as micro and macro time, right? And so, there's lots of ways to look at it, but I think like at a very micro level, you should have at least, I would say, anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes every single day to just be with yourself and pay attention to what's happening inside. Like, so that's the simplest thing. Maybe 5 minutes. Start with 5 minutes. Like,
Gotcha.
Just sit and just start to get to know what's happening inside of you. Like, it's simply
no
like
TV on?
Nothing. You can't have any distraction. You're sitting with yourself and you're getting to know yourself. What are some of the feelings I have? What are some of the thoughts I'm having? What's my body doing? Like, we're just not even attached to the body. Like, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Have I even eaten? Am I tired? Am I not? Like, it's crazy how those aren't easy questions for a lot of people to answer. So start with 5 to 20 minutes a day of just sitting with oneself. So that's a daily thing. Weekly, you can spend a half hour to an hour with yourself. Okay. Monthly, spend 4 hours. Like once a month, take 4 hours and go sit at the beach with yourself. Quarterly, take a day, right? Yearly, go on a retreat, right? But like to me, it has to be a practice. There isn't like some And again, I understand there's a lot of people selling this stuff and it's not bad. It has a place, but it's like, oh, come on this retreat and everything will be better. It's like, yeah, no, that doesn't work that way. Does that mean retreats are bad? No, they're great and they can be so valuable. But you have to integrate it into your lifestyle.
Yeah.
And it starts with the micros. It starts with 5 minutes every day. It's the same thing with saving money. Is it about saving $5,000 this weekend? Or is it about putting aside $20 a day? Right?
Yeah.
The compound principle. It compounds over time. So you want to build wealth, then put money away every day, every week, every month. You want to build capacity within yourself, so to be more connected to yourself. Well, that compounds over time too. Make those deposits every day. Take those 5 minutes and get to know yourself.
I like that. And I have gone on some great retreats, and you know that, different places, and I've been with friends and all that. But I already was doing my daily practices, and it was an and for me. And they were magical, but I was already building on my foundation.
And I will say one thing, Sandy, because you bring up I think it's important to highlight this. The value of going away on a retreat is that you remove yourself from distractions. That's the real value. You're forced to be where you are. So even on your micro resets, your micro time with yourself, you should get out of your environment, meaning like find a place, a sacred place. Maybe it's in your garden, maybe it's, at the tree down the block, at the park. I don't know, and that's where you just connect with you. But I would create a space that's sacred for the standpoint that it's for you and you. My weekly reset or my weekly touch-in with myself is I go sit at the beach every Sunday morning. And I love when the sun comes up and I sit there and I just do nothing. I just kind of check in. How are we doing, Matt? What's going on, brother? You know what I mean? What's on your mind? And I just kind of sit there and I'm aware, right? But that gets me out of it. I never do it in my office. I don't do it in my home. I don't do it at this is my home office. I don't do it at my other office. There's too many distractions, right? So there is a value to removing yourself from your environment so that you can eliminate the triggers in the environment that just distract you from being with you.
So Matt, I want to make sure that we get one or two of these questions in. But if you feel comfortable, without just going into it too much, because you mentioned it at the beginning, but I think it would be really special if you could just share a little bit of your journey, because you've had where you've done a lot of different businesses and a lot of different types of coaching that ended you here. And like you said, you continue to soul search and grow what you're doing with your business now. Can we just talk a little bit about how you got from California to Florida?
Sure.
Just to about the practice you had and where it led you, because you said you've been in it yourself. And I think it's important them to know, even the best of us who have this self-practice and self-discovery and teaching it, we can go and end up down a path before we know it that we aren't trusting ourselves. It happens to the best of us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say it can happen to everybody. I would say it will happen to everybody. And I think that if I or anybody I know has made them the exception to that rule, that's a major red flag as far as seeking mentors. Okay, I would say it's a major red flag. Anyway, I mean, so my journey started really with my body falling apart, and so I'll do the quickie, the quick version. Sandy, trust me, I'm not going to go crazy. Yeah. I had a lot of orthopedic surgery before I was 20, got offered major reconstructions of my ankle and my elbow before I was 23 years old, and was really trying to figure out why my body was breaking down at such a young age. And the thing that really irked me the most was I was doing everything the traditional model was telling me to do. I even had a father and a mother who were intricately involved in the medical practice. So I had access, man. I had access, right? To whatever I needed from the medical model. And it was like, okay, I'm doing all the things and I keep falling apart. And so the question I always ask myself, and even when I met my wife around this age, we've been married 23 years, we've been together for 25. is, man, there's got to be another way. There's got to be a better way. So we just started asking questions, so on and so forth. Met incredible mentors, and the trusting yourself piece. I'll weave this into this because I had a moment the first time where I really trusted myself. It was the best decision I ever made. You know, I was 4 out of 5 kids. You know, my oldest sister is a lawyer. My brother is a high-level officer, and he was a Secret Service agent. My sister's a teacher, and then there was me. So everybody had that career path dialed, and then there was Matt, who was trying to figure out what to do with himself, even though the options that were presented to me, I was like, none of them really feel right for me. I looked at physical therapy. I looked at chiropractic. I even did I did an internship with an orthopedic surgeon for a summer, which was super cool, by the way, watching surgeries. But none of them felt like my path. But I didn't know the path to take. And so I would I guess I should just apply to physical therapy school. And so I was 2 or 3 months from going to PT school, and I bailed. That was the first time. I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Then I was about, I think I was maybe a weeks away from starting chiropractic school. And I had a mentor, one of my most influential mentors. I got on the phone with him, and we got into a conversation. Make a long story short, he was talking about learning this new way of looking at human movement and function. That's the applied functional science that you mentioned. And there was this moment where I'm like, okay, I either go to chiropractic school, because that's the way that everybody in my life would be much more comfortable with me going to chiropractic school, because they're like, all right, finally Matt's settling in. But every part of my being was like, this is not what you want. To the point where the mentor of mine on the phone's like, well, Matt, what are you going to chiropractic school? You don't want to do that. And I remember thinking to myself, I know I don't, but I don't know what to do. Like, I remember my voice screaming inside of me, like, I don't know where to go. I remember saying this to him, I don't know where to go. And he's like, well, if you want to move to California and learn this thing from me, blah, blah, blah. At that time, he had a small office, smaller than the room I'm in right now, at the bottom of this little studio in Pasadena, and the restaurant was above, and sometimes the restaurant waste would come in, and it was a whole thing. So just picture this, Sandy. Hey, Mom and Dad, I'm not going to go to chiropractic school. I'm moving to California to study with this guy named Lenny, who has an office in this basement. It's new, Like, they were like, that's great, Matt. That's a great. No, they've been super supportive, but I can't imagine inside they were like, right? Like, what is he doing? Right? Which I understandable if I was a parent, right? But that was that moment where I trusted myself. I lived out of my car for a while. Eve was the only reason why we were eating. My wife, Eve, she always found a job while Matt was finding himself. But I kept pursuing that thread that was like, this, we have to keep following this. And so that led me down that path, and learned a ton, and started and opened a clinic in LA with my mentor. But then it came to a place where I was like, hey, there's other variables here. It's not just about mechanics. There's the systemic piece, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole with you, because I know what you want me to talk about here is that more mental, emotional, psychological piece that I saw impacting people's health. So there was something that said to me, Matt, we need to learn this. And I met a gentleman who was doing this type of personal development work, and I was like, oh my God, this is what I want. This is my thing. And boom, I went all in there. And when I say all in, Sandy, you know what I mean by all in? I do. I went all in, okay, and literally helped to develop this company, and got a lot from it. I was in. I built communities in LA and Florida, and supported other communities around the country. And there was always this little whisper throughout the whole time that something's off. Something's off. Something's off. And I would continually tell myself, Matt, stop. You don't know what you're talking about. Trust this, humble yourself, which was also the message that I was being told. So it kind of fueled this doubt and insecurity. But the voice kept getting louder and louder and louder and louder, to the point where there were certain things happening that I could no longer ignore. I mean, I could have, but it would have meant some things for my relationship with my wife, and really lots of things. And there was a moment, and I'll never forget it. It was pretty intense. Sandy, you know this story, but it was 2 years ago. we're literally in the process of closing on our house, our first house, a house we saved up for, a house that we negotiated the price during COVID and bought it 2 years later. So if anyone paid attention to real estate between that time, like our house almost doubled, okay? But we negotiated the price during COVID. And so we had this golden opportunity to settle into a beautiful home with our kids in a place that we loved. And I had this decision to make about leaving this company. By the way, it was 90% of my income at the time, okay? 3 weeks out from closing on our house, Eve and I sat down and I'm like, we can either toughen it out here for another month and keep playing this game and really be untrue to ourselves and this like nothing, like this is not a place we want to be. There's a lot of not great things happening here. We want out. Yeah. Or we step out now and risk losing the house, right? And this is, my God, Eve's an angel, honestly. But we decided, it was like, listen, like trusting ourselves, trusting what we know is best, our integrity, being lined up with who we are and our soul is more important than anything, like whatever the house, right? And so we left, and it was a big thing, man. And I had to tell the guy, our mortgage broker, listen, Eve actually just lost, she just quit her job. Can you imagine? 3 weeks before closing, okay? And we were hoping that they already confirmed employment. And so I was kind of like, so, what's the process look like the last 2 weeks? He's like, well, you're all set. All we're going to do is this, and then we do a final employment verification. I was like, oh no, I guess I have to tell you. Like, we left, we're out. And he was awesome. God bless this man too. We had the perfect people around us at that time. And he goes, all right, not ideal, Matt, I'm not going to lie, but we'll figure something out. And I go, okay. Like, I thought it was done deal. I thought he was going to be like, yeah. And so he calls me at like 3 a.m. the next morning. And he's like, dude, you're not going to believe this. Florida just changed their laws on jumbo loans. And we don't need Eve on there. And we're going to be able to package this better. And, you're going to be fine. You're going to close on time. And that was a moment where I was like, thank you for another reminder to trust myself, even when it seems like it makes no sense at all. And it made no sense on paper to do what we did. And it was the best decision we've ever made. And, here I am today. Difficult. Yeah. And that's when I wrote my book and really finding myself again to kind of bring it full circle. What I learned in that particular company, personal development company, was I was getting more disconnected to myself and buying into these narratives of the way it was and the way it should be, which was different than what I felt. Yeah. Right? And I felt more disconnected. And then I saw that disconnection from oneself was being celebrated in the community. And it was all kinds of things. Again, we don't have to go too much into that. And so the book that I wrote was really a way to find myself again. Like, in all honesty, I wrote that book more for me to find myself again, to remember the journey I was on, to get reconnected to that. And I wrote that book in 5 months, and, I'm going back to who I was and really integrating these 3 things and have such a respect and an honor for working with people with the mind and emotions, because I know how sacred that space is. And in my opinion, if you are not in that space with somebody to empower them, and you have any of your agenda in that space, which sometimes you may not know is there, I have to check myself too. Get the hell out, man, or shut up, because it's just not something to mess with. It's dangerous.
And I'm so glad that I thank you for sharing the story, because I really wanted to have people get a different perspective of what you've gone through recently. And it does take a lot of courage to do what you did, a lot of courage, because you were all in, and it was going to be really, really difficult for you to break away. And it was. But I think there's so many times that it's so rewarding when even myself and others, I've seen that, even when people that love them, well-meaning people, think a certain way. And I can tell my body starts getting jittery, but it just doesn't feel right for me.
Exactly. Don't ignore that. Yep.
That's difficult, because especially when so many people that you love and care about have a certain view. But man, oh man, Matt, when you told me, I was doing the happy dance.
I know you were. I know you were.
I was like, woo! But I also know that it was an amazing part of your journey. A lot of great came out of it. And now how much more empathetic and compassionate and understanding are you going to be for others?
There's no other way I would have.
You couldn't know that unless you went through that, you know?
I was just going to say, there's no way I could have it if I didn't go through that.
And that's with everyone and their story, you know, and their journey. Like, there's no way some of the things, you know, that happen, they happen for a reason. When you come out the other side, you're just so much more powerful.
Yeah, and that goes back to when we started this conversation. I could have read about that experience and understand it, but to have gone through it is completely different, right? It would be like me giving a woman advice on the best way to give birth to their child.
Yeah, I'm going to smack you. Yeah.
Exactly. And I understand that if I did that, I would setting myself to be smacked. Well, no, but I read a book on giving birth to a child, so I'm good. Like, think about how, like, that's insane.
Yeah. And I've heard that many times. Yeah.
It's like, no, dude, that's not how it works.
All right. So I saved this for the end because it's one of my favorite things that you say, and it's difficult. And one of your statements that we wanted to go over is learn to distinguish between uncomfortable feedback and unaligned feedback.
Yeah, that takes practice.
A lot of practice.
A lot of practice. But if you can start to even acknowledge that those two things exist and start to distinguish, start to learn to distinguish between those two things, it's so powerful. And honestly, we can really make this simple. Unaligned feedback is more that sensation that you were talking about a second ago. Like, you get these little, like, something's not right here.
Yeah, I get jittery.
You get jittery. It's like, this doesn't feel right. Like, it feels out of alignment. It feels like I'm out of my track almost. Like, that's not me. That doesn't feel right. Now, I understand that it's easy to create that narrative after the discomfort of someone telling you something you need to hear. Okay? And so you got to pay attention, because if the initial response is that fluttery, it doesn't sound right. Hey, Sandy, I think what we should do is we should, get this cheap labor, these kids, and, and I think we can move forward on our project together. Like, we can get slave labor. Like, there's going to be a visceral, it doesn't feel right, Matt. That's a visceral reaction. If I said, Sandy, you know what? You really got to be more proactive, and you got to get out there and let people know you exist. And then you're like, I don't like that. I don't like that. Right? That's different than out of alignment.
Yeah.
That's uncomfortable. Right? Now, sometimes that discomfort can pass quick, and you're like, yeah, Matt, that's not who I am. That's not aligned with who I am. So I don't do that outreach stuff. So you got to watch it. You got to be honest with yourself, right? What is the reaction that happens when someone gives you some kind of feedback? And like I said, it takes practice. It does take practice. But if you have a space where you can pull it apart with somebody, okay? Like, and what I mean by pull it apart is just have a conversation about it. Not find someone who can tell you what it is.
Yeah.
Find someone who can help you pull it apart so you can figure it out. I have a client that always gets frustrated. I'm going to ask you this question now, but I know you're not going to tell me the answer. She always says this to me. You're not going to tell me what to do. I go, you're right, I'm not. But I'll help you figure out what, you can figure out what you think is best. Like, she's funny. She now it's a joke. Yeah. But that's what I mean by those two things, Sandy. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And thank you for saying it's not that easy. It does take work.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a lot of times if I feel uncomfortable like that, like even if you said something to me, I will give myself a couple days to sit with it, to really, for me, I need like a day or two to go, is there something to that? Or am I going to call and say poppycock? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's what I do. And I can tell the difference, but I give myself time before I call bullcrap. Yeah.
That's the practice. Yes, Sandy. I love
Well,
it. That's a
I'm
great
glad
way to
took
do it.
30 minutes, but so, that's all good. No, I told you it was special, and I knew we had a lot to get in. And I did want to get to a lot of my questions. We did get to some, but I wanted a little bit about your journey. And all in all, for us, man, we stayed on track, which is unusual,
We're learning too, man.
Yeah, we're doing good.
Each time.
All right, now before we go, though, where can they find your book, Health to Vitality? Let's start with that. And then where can they find you if they want to work with you?
They can find it at Barnes & Noble, Target, like it's all online. Health to Vitality is the name of the book. And they can find me on my website, MatthewLaBosco.com. If you wanted to inquire about working with me privately, there's an option to do a consult. But I also have online courses in a community that you can engage with as well, weekly coaching calls, things like that. So that you can find that all on my website.
And you also do work with a few people in person, correct?
Oh, yeah. If you're in Jupiter, Florida, yeah. I have an office here in Jupiter. We're actually, going to be moving to a new, upgrading our location and office to Palm Beach Gardens. But yeah, no, I have a private practice here in Jupiter, work with people one-on-one and also virtually if they're not in the area.
Cool. All right, before we go, Matthew LaBosco, is there anything you want to say to the people out there that we didn't get in already?
Be patient with yourself and give yourself the space to cultivate these skills that we've talked about. So I know when people talk about, well, just do this and just trust yourself or just do X, I understand how it can be frustrating. It's like, well, yeah, but how do I do that? Or, I don't, or have some compassion, have some patience, have some, patience with yourself to just start doing something a little bit today that moves you in that direction. It's all about trajectory. It's not about where you are. Where's the trajectory on? Am I learning to trust myself a little bit more today? Do I trust myself a little bit more today than I did yesterday? Like, keep things in perspective, go slow, and, enjoy the ride.
Yeah. I got something to say, special edition with Matt. Don't worry. I know some of you are like, I didn't even know. It's 1 o'clock on a Tuesday. Calm down, or if you missed the entire show. What I'm going to do is record it, and then I'm going to put it everywhere. I'm going to send it to Matt. I'm going to put it on the website, LinkedIn, Facebook. We would both really, really appreciate you sharing, rating it, and liking it. Matt, I love you to pieces. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your story. I really do believe you're one of the very few people in my life, and I mean this, that if I am at all confused, questioning what's going on, where I want to go, you were going to be so good or bad or ugly, honest with me to get me where I want to go. And it's always felt like it's never about you. It's all about you meeting me where I am. And that's so important. And it's so rare. And I don't feel like you're bringing your shit to it. You're always meeting me where I am and where I need to go. So I'm very grateful that you are in my life.
Well, thank you, Sam. It means a lot. Love you too. And it's so fun to be on this journey with you. And who knows what the future brings for us. It'll be fun to discover.
Who knows, baby? Who knows? All right, you know what I'm going to say. Until next time, bye, Matt, and toodles.
Bye, guys.